Then there's the structure of things like, oh, I'm a vegetarian because I don't want to eat anything that's got eyes. And I'm going, the morality of that is crazy. Because one then doesn't think of, with, for example, almonds or soy, one doesn't think of the vast quantity of other species that have been destroyed when that field's been razed to the ground to plant those crops, just so someone can feel better about their latte. So, and particularly considering that we are an omnivore as a species. And if a person chooses to not eat flesh, that's a choice. But it's not a moral judgment. It's not based on anything factual. It's based on the idea that maybe we won't die if we eat something that makes us feel like we're God. And that's where we've got to be very, very careful, is to relate on a level playing field with our species cousins and understand what respect is, and to allow ourselves to disrespect those people who lie to us, and to walk away if we know nothing can be done. Like with Fiona talking about the people that she's around, when there's nothing to be done and a person has set their adamancy in concrete or in steel, you're not going to have an effect. It's like no one can have an effect on anybody who is heavily Christian. Oh, they absolutely will not let you in. It's the terror of death, the terror of not being. And as an existentialist, I find that I think about it daily, because the need to be ready at any time, as close to love as I can give without expecting anything back. Next person.
I find this topic absolutely fascinating, and I know like over the years we've had like some phone calls here and there, and where I've asked about the idea of ghosts, and we sort of really I remember we touched in the past on like the terror that I experienced from if there were things, for example, in the house or in the room around me, that I wasn't getting good feelings out of. And I just wondered if we could just visit that, because yeah, I think about it all the time as well. And there was a big fear of I did have a fear of the dark actually, which I've overcome a little bit now because I've realized there's worse things that happen to you when you go to bed. But like, yeah, so it's like I'm really interested about that law.
In Shirley Street, where I lived for 12 years, on the back veranda was a woman in white. She was quite old. She would have been old, probably my age. Pretty funny when you think about it. Short hair. It was a white nightie. She would just stand there. I wasn't the only person who saw her. But she was transient as far as peripherals were concerned. She was always seen peripherally. When I moved to Wilson's Creek, which was absolutely similar setup house-wise, she was there. Now she's here. I don't know who she is, but she turned up one day and she has never left. I was also sitting on the back veranda one evening and I saw this very tall Tuareg man outside the guest room window, and somebody was staying, and I could describe him absolutely. He was absolutely beautiful. And I spoke to him the next day, and he said, "You saw him? He's one of my," and he used the word guides. So I don't know what that is. It's a word. It's a word. We find a word to title whatever we've got to find. Table, guides, light switch, cat. We objectify so much. And again, it's the fear of death. It's the fear of the dead. The covering of, in many cultures, the mirrors are covered with black. In many cultures, even the First Nation culture, you do not speak the name of the person who's died. You don't show the images. And I'm very aware of why that is. without having asked the question, because I'm also very aware that First Nation people throughout the world have been inculcated or invaded by Christianity. And so things, unless they've got no contact, who knows? I understand completely because I have no nostalgia. And looking at images from the so-called past, that's the dead. That's the dead. That's where we can get trapped in the idea of actually aging then. There's no other species that presents, I mean, as old. Dogs. You'll never get a dog presenting as old, even crippled with arthritis, grey of muzzle. If you chuck the ball, they're going to get the ball. Then most species that I've encountered, they will take themselves away to die. And then how we dispose of them or how we present them to Earth is what's important from then. So but the idea of ghosts, that's a word we put on people that are not dead. They're not dead. And there's also many thoughts that I think Lyle Watson went into the idea of looking at elephants and ants. I'm pretty sure it was that book. I forget now. The idea of, if you're an ant, do you recognize an elephant? No, not necessarily, because of the size, because of the absolute alienness. You would know it if the foot came down. The mudslide, that's the cave-in. There's a whole section of the species just carked it. But does the ant know that it's an elephant? No, because we've named these phenomenon. Do we know? I mean, what science is looking at the concept at the moment of multiverses. You know the word universe means one song. Everybody knows that, yeah. So multiverses, just there's quite possibly several songs, and they may very well be interwoven, just like with string theory. Quantum physics is a very interesting science in its mysticism side of things. In the mystical side of quantum physics is poetry, very, very poetic. And a lot of quantum physicists do write poetry, interestingly enough, and are musicians. This idea of alternative realities, I've thought of this so often. I'm very aware that if I sit like this, I'm looking at the screen, but if I sit like this and I don't look at the screen, I can see a section of my nose. But other than that, I don't know what you're seeing. And you can't see it. Look away, look away from the screen and tell me how much of yourself you can see with your eyes wide open. We invent ourselves through mirrors. We invent ourselves through image production. But we're such a young species, aren't we? We're such an intensely young species, and we don't know anything. So the idea of ghosts or phantoms or hauntings, we don't know anything. And I think in a way that that's kind of beautiful. But to fear them is because we fear death. Now, I fear the living. I'm weaponed up. I'm a weaponed woman.